Okay, next is the affirmative recross examination of negative. Mr. Albrecht, you have 10 minutes to recross examine Turretin fan. You may begin when you're ready.
All right, Turton fan. Going right back to 1 Corinthians chapter 3, this time in verse 17. Earlier we were covering basically verse 14, then we went to 15, then we went to 17. I'm curious if you would agree with me that the Greek word thyrai, in reference to the individual that is being spoken of being destroyed here, would you agree upon seeing that word that this individual is indeed losing, or if you'd say maybe not losing, but having no opportunity of being saved, but of having his person destroyed, basically being condemned, in other words? Would you agree with that? Excuse me.
Well, the word that you're referring to, if I heard you correctly, is the word that's translated file here. Did I hear you correctly, or are you referring to a different word?
I believe that would be the same word. Yeah, I think in certain instances, I believe defile it's translated defile in some instances. I think so. I'm
Okay.
let me see. So you would prefer the translation defiled. You would not agree that the person here is not being saved and being destroyed.
All right. Well, excuse me. The reason for my requesting that clarification is if you read the verse as, if any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. And the
Well,
word there,
okay. There we go. There we go. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was I thought that you were referring to the word for destroy. I'm actually referring for the word for destroy.
which, well, what I guess the interesting thing there is that it's the same Greek word for both of those, for defile and destroy
Right,
there.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So it's yeah.
Yes, it is the same. In fact, if it says if any man destroys the temple of God, I'm actually looking at the New American Standard rendering, which says if any man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him. So I guess would you agree with me that the person in this verse is not being saved, but rather being destroyed? In other words, not receiving salvation.
Yes.
Okay, great. Then my next question for you is in regards to a comment that you made in your blog. In your blog, you say, and I'm going to read it word for word. You say here that we will be saved, in reference to this verse, regardless of how well we build, since we have the foundation of Christ. Um, is it indeed incorrect that regardless of how well we build, that we will not be saved, as is shown in verse 17?
What's incorrect was your statement that that was in reference to this verse. It was in reference to 1 Corinthians
Okay.
3:12 through
I
15. Yeah.
Oh, all right. I was under the impression that you were also including this in the whole context. Okay, I'll move on to my next question then. Church and fan, in examining Church Father Clement of Alexandria, who was from the late 2nd or early 3rd century, would you agree with his statements that when he says that if one still has sin, then in the afterlife he must be punished and tormented, purified? Would you agree with that, or would you believe that he is incorrect?
I if Clement of Alexandria said that, I would disagree with Clement of Alexandria. Yes.
All right, Turretin fan, do you agree with Origen, who says that if one departs this life with venial sins, lighter faults, basically, he says lighter faults, that he must go through a fire that purifies his soul and prepares him for heaven? Would you also disagree with Origen?
Yeah, I would. The the answer to that would be assuming that origin means something different than what we would say when we say that the person's glorified. Uh, in other words, that their sanctification is completed. If he means something other than that, then I would disagree. But if he just means that, and he's just using a more colorful metaphor, then I wouldn't have a problem with that.
Are you aware that Catholics believe that purgatory is, in essence, the final stage, of sanctification?
Yes. Yep.
And would you still disagree with such a statement? such a belief, actually.
With purgatory?
Yes, if it
Yes,
is
because
described to you as
yes.
being simply the final stage of our sanctification, only possible because Christ died for us on the cross, would you still deny the possibility of purgatory?
Well, what I think it's if purgatory were different than what it is in Roman Catholic dogma, then I might agree with it. In some, as long as you remove it being from being, it's no longer a place or state in which sin is expiated through suffering, then yes, I would have I would I would have a much more favorable inclination towards the general concept. Of course, it still wouldn't be a place. It still wouldn't be, there wouldn't be prayers for the dead. There wouldn't be lots of other things. But but my
What if we
point
were to,
in that
what
is
if, okay, excuse me.
my objection is real. My central objection, the one I raised in the first part of my speech, was that this undermines the sufficiency of Christ's work. When you say some additional expiation is needed, that Christ's work just enables you to have the possibility to do this extra expiation.
What if we were to say that it is because of Christ's sacrifice, all done by Christ, of course, all through Christ, that we're allowed to be sanctified at the end of our life? Let's say that that this purification of our sins is not a state or a place or anything. Let's just say that it is something that occurs instantaneously. Would you then accept a belief in a purification at the end of our lives if we were to frame it in that way?
Well, the if you change the dogma, uh, if you change the dogma to just being that our sanctification is completed, then I wouldn't have a problem. If that's what you're asking, then that's the answer. If you're asking, can I, is it enough that the benefit of purgatory is made possible by Christ's suffering? Then no, that still doesn't uh, give Christ's work the full dignity it deserves.
Okay. Um, well, I guess we went over it earlier that you are aware that Catholics believe that purgatory is the final um, stage of sanctification, but I guess we're still a bit far off there. You would have no issue on certain instances, but you would still have an issue with prayer for the dead. Am I correct?
Right.
Okay, I'll move on from that then. Church and fan, if I were to be able to prove to you that every single father that interpreted 1 Corinthians 3 as referencing to a man undergoing purification, and if I were able to show you numerous early fathers and Christian sources that taught a purification of the soul in the afterlife, would you accept the belief in purgatory as being an ancient Christian teaching?
Uh, no, of course not. That's only one thing that's necessary in order to have purgatory. It's not. It's not the. That would be the exact logical fallacy I pointed out in my opening speech, where you say, "Well, if purgatory exists, then you have these features. Then now I say you have these features, therefore purgatory exists." No, it doesn't follow. The other way around. If purgatory existed, then it would have those characteristics. But simply having those characteristics doesn't entail purgatory.
Okay. Are you aware of any early father, at least, that upon reading the testimonies of perhaps Clement or Tertullian or Origen or even Augustine, are you aware of any father that spoke out against them and said, you know what, that this is ridiculous, believing that a soul could be purified in the afterlife? Are you aware of any father that took such a position?
Well, I'm aware that I'm trying to recall now which father it was. Gregory in William Jurgen's The Faith of the Early Fathers. I want to say it was his volume 3. He mentioned a dialogue in which the work he attributed to Gregory had Gregory responding to an objection about posthumous purification. So that's fairly late, but nevertheless, it would be an example where there's some some objection being raised, whether it's a fictitious person or a real person.
And was this Gregory of Nyssa or was it Nazianzus?
The Bishop of Rome, Gregory the Great.
Oh, so you believe that Gregory the Great denied the possibility of purgatory? Am I correct? Before I know my time's up, but if you could answer that real quick.
No, that's not what I'm saying. Although I don't believe he ever heard the word purgatory, as I stated from the beginning. But what I was saying was that in his dialogue, if I recall, and I don't know for sure that it's his, I just know that Jürgens attributed it to him. In that dialogue that he propounded, and this is, I can give you the more specific reference. It's his dialogues. It's page 320 in volume 3 of Jürgens, and he ascribes the person saying, Peter says, I should like to know whether or not we must believe in a purgatorial fire after death. And according to Jürgens here, Gregory responds in a positive way to that, and so
Okay.
yeah, that's what I was referring to.
Great. Well, I think that's perfect. Okay, thank you. That was a great point.